Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Adoni, who's the author of The Unstoppable Startup, Mastering Israel's Secret Rules of Chutzpah. Uri, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, so I want to get started with learning a little bit about your background. I see from your bio you've got a very solid background in venture capital and venture partners. So give us a little bit of your background and then what led you to write this book.
Sure. In the last almost 13 years, I've been working as a partner at JVP, Media Labs. JVP is one of the largest funds in Israel. It has about $1.4 billion under management and 8 consecutive funds. Nice track record, IPOs, M&As, obviously a lot of companies that never made it, the usual kind of VC story. But it's a very active fund in Israel. And prior to that, I was the CEO of MSN in Israel, so I know a little bit of kind of corporate America, what it's like to work for Microsoft. So that was also an interesting background to have. And, after many years in high tech, I thought I should share some of my experience and kind of give my knowledge or tips to startups wherever I can help.
Yeah, it really, you hear that that story so many times, which is I had my head down doing what I do, learning these lessons the hard way, making mistakes, learning from them, and then at some point you go from kind of like surviving to thriving where you want to give back. And what better way to give back than to helping, entrepreneurs and startups. So I think that's just such a perfect lead in to why you want to put this book together.
Yes, I think that, the statistics that, the majority of startups fail. And in a way, any entrepreneur, or most entrepreneurs are aware of this. And you ask yourself sometime, why would a rational person go to make such irrational decision and to go into something that the odds are against you? And, the short answer is usually, and I think probably the better answer, it's because they have the passion for it and they really want to do something that would change the category or the space they're acting in. And, my kind of humble mission, so to speak, of this book was trying to reduce this number. So I said, if one startup around the world would be a success just because, or wouldn't, would take some of this advice and that would help them be on the positive side of the statistics, that's I had my share of sharing this knowledge. So I think that at the end of the day, this is why it's kind of a very practical book. It's a kind of a guide, a hands-on book. It's not a theoretical book. And I share a lot of stories from very successful entrepreneurs. And, how they made it the hard way usually. It's never easy. Yep. It's always a bumpy road, and it's a roller coaster like any startup. But from these stories and from other entrepreneurs and a little bit from my experience, I've tried to kind of share it with the, current entrepreneurs that maybe we can kind of change this statistics for the better.
That's awesome. And I know you've done work in both Israel and the United States. What is the difference in a startup between the two countries?
I think that the main thing would be the market. So the U.S. is a large market, and when you are growing in a large market, it's your local market, and so you don't need to expand outside the U.S. in the first few years of the existence of the company. It's also in many cases the market that kind of leads the world in many aspects. So if you made it in the U.S., in many cases you kind of conquered the world or the category that you're on. unlike the U.S., Israel is a very small market. We're only 9 million population of 9 million people, and there's not much to do here in terms of, if you want to be a global company, the local market is not significant at all. So any startup from day one needs to think how it expands, usually to the U.S., and what are the actions that the startups need to take in order to expand and actually become some kind of a global player, even if it's coming from a relatively small country like Israel. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think, it's the accessibility for the corporates, for the clients. So again, the American startup, that's the local market, and your employees, your management, your board, they all know the market. They'll have their Rolodex with all the people they know in the network. With the Israeli case, you need to actually create this network. Either you do it yourself or through hiring people from the U.S. to your company. So actually, the accessibility to the businesses, to your clients, to the network, to the distribution channels, partners, etc. You actually need to build it each time, and you don't kind of born with it as a U.S. citizen or as a U.S. entrepreneur.
And it's kind of like many things. It doesn't matter the color of your skin, where you're from. When we're applying, entrepreneurial startup, there's still roadblocks and obstacles and hurdles no matter where you're starting up. So I think that's a really big piece.
Sure.
And this fact sticks in my mind, and maybe you can clarify it. Am I remembering correctly that Israel is one of the leaders in the world for patent development?
Correct. Yeah. Well, Israel it's actually not the leading, but it's one of the leading in the world in patents. It's the number one country in terms of startups per capita, venture capital per capita. We're number 3 in NASDAQ, and the 2 countries before us is the U.S. and China, which are a bit bigger than us. So there's a lot of innovation coming out from here, and it kind of leads me to the third point that I want to make about the difference is a bit of a difference in the culture. And this is also what the book is about. It's about the Israeli chutzpah, which is, again, it's a kind of a differentiator between the Israeli entrepreneur and I would say maybe the average entrepreneur. Average U.S. entrepreneur that may have this chutzpah, but they don't necessarily know to call it this way.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
So in a way, I think that chutzpah for the ones who are less familiar with the word is it's kind of a word that it's hard to define. It's mainly around audacity, being bold, go-to approach. It's a very thin line between being self-confident and being arrogant, which is kind of the negative side of chutzpah, so we don't want to be on that side. But definitely have the mindset, which is, I think, the most important thing, the mindset of chutzpah that enables you to come up with a startup and say, okay, I'm going to build something, better than EMC or better than Google or better than Microsoft or something that will create a new, category or revolutionize a space. So you need to really be bold about it and to have this chutzpah or audacity and the confidence, and obviously you need the team and the technology and all the other elements. But the mindset, from what I've seen, is one of the most important things that the entrepreneurs and the founders of a company should have.
It makes me think of maybe where a large obstacle or hurdle would come up. Some entrepreneurs may go, oh, that's the reason why we should not do this. Or, well, I guess we can't do that anymore. Well, chutzpah then would be, hey, I see this. Let's plow through it. Let's go around it, under it, over it. How can we overcome it? And it's the confidence, but not arrogance in a bad way. It's just, we see obstacles, but we're not going to let them stop us.
Exactly. And even if it means that we don't need to work according to the book, so to speak. So obviously not doing something illegal, obviously, But if there is a way that we should, go around thing, bend something, have a different maybe interpretation, it's all legit in order to get to your, to your target, to your objective. And so definitely, I think it's about a way of kind of being self-confident enough to also improvise and be creative on the way, and not just stick to a plan that you are committed to in some manner. By the way, on that element, I would also mention the Israeli army, which also kind of in a difference from other places. In Israel, there's a compulsory service that we all go, men and women. Most of us go to the army at the age of 18. And one of the interesting things in the army is it's kind of the culture of the army in Israel. And in many cases, people think that the most important thing is like to obey orders. And it's not. The most important thing in the Israeli army is to complete the mission. This is it. You can do everything or anything you want in order to complete the mission. And I was a commander of a combat unit for many years. And one of the things that you're being trained is actually it's that you're trained always that the plan will never go as planned. And so you need always to improvise. You need to find a solution. Definitely if you're in a hostile territory or you're in a combat, nothing goes by the plan. And so in a way you are trained from a very young age to kind of see a problem, improvise, and have this complete the mission mindset, which is very powerful. And when you take this mindset to a startup, it's also very powerful because you have these entrepreneurs, like you said earlier, they wouldn't stop. If something, so the plan said A, we need to do B, or we need to, find a better solution, we'll do that. And so, in a way, I think also this Israeli army culture, in a way, is part of this, what we call the startup nation, or the culture behind the startups in Israel, which also is another angle of the ecosystem in Israel.
It reminds me when you're talking about being creative and thinking outside the lines. Have you ever seen that? I guess you would call it a puzzle where it's 9 dots, 3 dots.
You have to make one line. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And people go, you can't do it. But then when they're showed that you go all the way up and outside and then down and over, it's like, oh, wait, I guess you can. Well, it's not breaking the rules or being illegal like you mentioned. It is just being creative. And maybe there's things like, look at that competitor. We can't overtake them. But what if there was an opportunity to align and maybe create a new line of business where there's no overlap and loss of... So, I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs only look at, here's the way we've always done it. You can't do it this way. But if you can step back and look at it through a fresh set of eyes, maybe that is able to be accomplished, and even in bigger ways than you could have imagined.
Exactly. One of the examples I give just on that point exactly is a company called Space.il, which is it was kind of a competition that Google launched at the time and said we're going to give $20 million to a team that will put some kind of a spaceship on the moon, and it needs to travel for 500 feet or something like that on the moon. And everyone, there was quite a few teams that were participating, and they all planned, this kind of a spaceship or a lunar that needs the lunar that's like a vehicle that will travel on the moon for 500 feet, and or 500 meters, whatever it was. And then the Israeli team had this idea. They said it didn't say it has to travel on the ground. It said it needs to kind of move 500. So they asked Google if their spaceship, if it's okay that it will jump for 500 meters. And Google looked at the rules. They said, it doesn't say anywhere that it needs to actually be physically on the ground when it moves. It can jump. And so the whole concept of jumping changed the whole vehicle, because you don't have to carry a very heavy vehicle, which, you need the fuel, you need the side, it was much more complicated. But it's just a nice example of how you look at the same rules, and only the Israeli team thought that they can actually make a jump rather than travel on the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
So it's definitely this kind of creative way of looking at things that I think it's definitely essential when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I love examples and stories like that. One of the things you talk about in the book is how to foresee the future and innovate to meet the demands. And that makes me think of, the example that we've heard so many times, that Apple, they create things that we as consumers never knew we needed or wanted, but now all of a sudden we need 1,000 or 2,000 songs in our pocket, and we need a phone that does whatever. How do you teach entrepreneurs to foresee the future? Number one, because you need to be able to have a kind of like an inclination of where things are going, so that you can then start to innovate.
True. So one of the things is that conventional research will not necessarily bring you there. So there's a lot of people think that, venture capital is also about Excel sheets, and, it's a lot of it is about the hunch and about knowing the market and feeling, where the winds are blowing, and in a way trying to have a hypothesis, and maybe that's the main thing. You need to have a hypothesis of where the market is going, when it will get there, and then try to create a product and a solution or proposition that will meet the market need in the right time and the right place. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you're too early to the market. Sometimes you're too late. Sometimes the competitor will, will beat you. But it's kind of I would say it's an exercise that you need to do, saying, okay, this is where we are. This is where it looks like the market is going in terms of, and these very days are a perfect example, where the market is going in terms of, all sorts of telemedicine and remote working and educational technologies and all sorts of stuff that nobody really knows where it will go. But if you're a good entrepreneur, you will have some kind of hypothesis that is built on, some data and some examples that you have today. But you say, okay, I think it'll go this way, and then if it'll go this way, I need to build this product that will answer this need. Again, I'll give you an example. At the time, we invested in a company called Navajo, that it was just in the very, very early days of cloud computing, and we've heard from many corporates saying, we're never going to put our data on the cloud because it's not safe. And it will be maybe, for photos or whatever, we're not going to put any sensitive data on the cloud. And we thought, that's an opportunity because it wasn't safe. So we created this company that encrypted the data when you are uploading and downloading, so it became safe. And Salesforce bought this company relatively quickly because it was one of the first companies that said, okay, if this is where we are, this is the protection that we will need to do. Same thing with IoT, Internet of Things. You have all these devices, they need to be protected because otherwise somebody from outside will control your car or your house or whatever, or your heart for that matter. You need to kind of foresee there is a trend and what will be the issues, the needs, the pains, the opportunities that this trend is actually bringing. And I think that's the main mindset that brings you eventually to kind of foresee the future. And again, you may be right, you may be wrong, and you may find out that you're not 100% accurate, which is usually the case. And then you kind of, you tweak on the way, sometimes you pivot on the way, you change, but you have to be very, very sensitive to what the market is telling you and react quickly to it. So even if your initial hypothesis is not 100% right, only 80, the rest of the 20% you need to make adjustment or, 40% or whatever, as you go along and not, be stuck to one thing and just go with it against the wall. So that's kind of, I guess, the exercise to foresee the future in a way.
Yeah, it is, like you said, an educated guess, but it comes from experience, and it reminds me of the similarity of risk. We know that as an entrepreneur, you need to take risk, but it needs to be calculated risk. You need to kind of, when you're playing chess and you move your piece and you leave your finger on it to look around to just make sure that's the right move. Well, risk is something you need to calculate and say, what if we do this? If this, then that. And the same with looking at those trends. It's like the old quote we've heard for years from Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, I skate where the puck is headed. Well, our innovation needs to be where the market is headed and then get a step or two ahead of it so that we're there and we're the leader and the trendsetter when the market comes there.
Exactly. And if you do that right, you have a good chance of becoming the new category leader, because you are kind of, in some cases, you're inventing a category which wasn't existed before, so you can become the category leader. And you see large companies, like Uber or Airbnb or Twitter for that matter, they kind of invented a new thing because they saw where the market is going, where the potential is, and then once you created it and you've built the right proposition in the right manner, you become, the synonymous to the category. And yes, there will be competitors, obviously, and it's a good thing. But as a category leader, you're in a much better position to gain the market share of the leader.
Yes, I love it. And I love the mindset and confidence that we've been talking about that entrepreneurs need to have. I'm excited to see the results of your book launch. So let's wrap up with what is the best way that people can reach out and connect with you and pick up a copy of your book.
Sure. The book has a website. It's called theunstoppablestartup.com. And there's all the ways to order the book from there. Obviously, they can reach me on LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm active on social media and Twitter, so all these channels are good. But the book, the main place for the book would be the website.
Excellent. Well, Uri, thank you so much for coming on. It was wonderful talking to you about your new book, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.